Hello, this is Angelia, and you're listening to or watching the podcast, Why You Do What You Do. A podcast that talks about human development and psychology, and maybe help you figure out a little bit more about why you do what you do. And last time we were talking about some of, the stages that Freud considered to be important in your life. Like I said, most people feel like he was a little too heavy on the sex side, and and we're going to take back up on stuff like that. For instance, a young man who never resolved the Oedipal conflict of his phallic stage must constantly repress or deny or sublimate or use some other defense mechanism his id's desire to replace his father in his mother's affections. And now all little kids are like that. They think they're going to grow up and marry, the other person. Some of them say that, some of them don't say that, but it's a thing. Consequently, his superego, in retaliation for such offensive thoughts, because that's definitely a taboo, is always trying to keep him in line about anything sexual. So, the superego's like, no. Like I said, it's kind of like you got your superego and your id, just like, you used to have the devil on your shoulder and an angel on the other shoulder, like they show in the cartoons. Yeah, that's kind of going on inside your mind all the time. At the same time, the unresolved Oedipal conflict has resulted in fixation. I'm sure it's a word you've heard, where people get fixated on something. An arrest of normal emotional growth at the phallic stage, meaning the sexual gratification, which he is not getting, is of primary importance. And especially in men, that seems to be a thing. You hear guys talk about, blue balls and all this crap that's not real. But, the more they want a thing, the more they fixate on it, and then it becomes a problem in their life. His id is doubly denied and fights harder to get its needs met. His ego works overtime and eventually weakens. And that's when he's going to do something about it. The influence of Freud. Freud's impact on the theories and research of both normal and abnormal behavior was profound. And that's why we're still talking about him today. His was the first systematic attempt to show that deviance could result from purely psychological functions rather than organic brain dysfunctions, like the previous people thought that, it was a physical thing in the brain, not necessarily any psychological thing happening in there. Furthermore, just as the disease model replaced demonology, remember we talked about that before that you were possessed and evil and, whatever else, if you had mental illness. His psychoanalytic theory replaced the disease model, at least among his followers. So we've come a step further. Each time, we've come a step further from, the evilness thing to the organic something wrong in the brain thing to now, there's thoughts and psychology happening in the brain also. Many of Freud's concepts have come under fire today because, like I said, he was pretty heavy into the sex aspect. Critics claim, for instance, that his theories, number one, place far too much emphasis on the sex drive. Number two, are biased, and that they reflect a primarily male psychology, like the whole penis envy thing. Number three, neglect the effect that environment can have on development, which it definitely does. And number four, lack sufficient research evidence in their support. Because he wasn't doing a whole lot of research. He was just coming, but he was still doing better than the guys who came before him. So that's how we learn. Nevertheless, the psychoanalytic model made many valuable contributions to the understanding of behavioral deviance. It was starting to show folks that, hey, this is something going on inside of the person in their psyche. It's not just they got a bad brain. It's not just they're possessed or whatever. There's a problem in there. Major contributions. Freud developed many theories besides those that emphasized the mind in the development of mental disorders. but that's what he's most known for. The added new insights into the whys and wherefores of human behavior, because that's what they were trying to figure out. Why are these people acting like this? The idea that motivation, that is, the reasoning behind a behavior, could be unconscious was revolutionary, because folks hadn't thought about that. It's like, this happened to make you this way, and you're not consciously being this way. It's just a way that you adapted to cope with the things that happened. The people act to satisfy a desire or impulse of which they are not aware of was a concept that excited the imagination of many psychologists, because that was something that, well, you know what, I have feelings, and my feelings do make me do things, and okay, so that probably applies to everybody else, and there's probably reasons why this, that, and the other thing are happening. So the light bulb came on for folks. It also led to a quite innovative therapeutic technique, the talking cure, which is what most psychologists, are heavy on today. There's other stuff going on, but, going in there and talking about your problems and getting them worked out and figuring out why they're problems, and what you're going to do about it, that's mostly, talking. The idea that emotional problems could be solved by simple conversation was revolutionary, because they were trying to make it harder than it was, like most everybody does in the beginning of things. It might just be, someone said this to you and it affected you in this way, and now you've coped with it by doing this and using this defense mechanism. And, if you can pull that out from under things, if you want to think of it like a game of Jenga, every time someone does something or says something to you, it puts a platform there where you build on it. And in psychotherapy, talk therapy, the idea is to pull those out so that all this can come down to the ground, and you can figure out why this happened, what you're going to do to overcome this. So, that's why I say therapy's a good thing. Don't be scared. It's not a bad thing. Dream interpretation, which we'll talk about later on, was another Freudian innovation. Because not other guys, they wasn't worried about people's dreams. That dreams just something going on, a little movie your brain's showing you while you're asleep to keep you entertained. Freudian theory also highlighted the impact that early childhood experiences can have on later personality and adjustment problems, because they do. There's a certain aspect of society that thinks, oh, you just overcome it. You just do what you need to do. And 9 times out of 10, that involves repression. They're pushing it back and not dealing with it, pretending that they are dealing with it by just walking through it. So, it's not healthy, because one day they're going to explode, and, they need to take out their garbage so it's no longer festering in there, and deal with it. His use of the term sex, although used originally in a broader sense, did help free that formerly taboo area for more discussion and research, because before you couldn't talk about that, Victorian days, oh heck no, you can't talk about that. But he did, and people were like, oh, well, okay, now we're going to talk about it a little bit. Finally, the idea that mental disorders are essentially exaggerated attempts to defend the ego from problems it cannot resolve was also unique. Because, let's face it, if there's stuff that happens to you when you're a kid you don't understand, you can't resolve it, you can't figure it out. So the best thing your ego is going to do is you're going to act out a little bit, or you're going to repress it, and later on you can deal with it. And a lot of times that's what happens. So, your poor ego's job is to figure out, what am I going to do with this? And sometimes it does not have the knowledge or ability to figure out what it's going to do with stuff. So, furthermore, this meant that the psychological principles underlying normal behavior applied as well to psychopathology. So the stuff that makes you be normal, there's other stuff that can make you be abnormal, which helped remove some of the stigma that had always been attached to mental illness. Because now they're figuring out, well, it's not that this person is defective or messed up or crazy or, whatever. Then there's still people who are like that. Ignorant folks throw those words around and everything and still have, stigma associated with mental illness. But that is ignorant. It's a problem. It's a problem that can be solved. The psychogenic view, post-Freudian theorists. Freud's hypotheses served to launch numerous other psychological theories of behavioral deviance. Many were produced by his students or by their students. In effect, these were variations on Freud's own themes, since most of his students accepted at least some part of their teacher's ideas. Because he had some points, but it's like, anything where we're learning something, new, there's some margin for error. However, some psychologists rejected the psychodynamic theory, and even eventually, oh my gosh, I'm going to sneeze and I'm trying not to sneeze. Oh. Bless me, Lord. Eventually worked out their own models. And, that's how we learn and grow. Someone decided this apple's good to eat, and someone said, oh, okay, if you break the apple open, its juice is inside, and it's even better. And someone said, oh, hey, if you cut this apple up, it's easier to eat. And someone's like, oh, okay, well, if you squeeze the juice out, it's good to drink. And someone says, oh, if you mash this apple up to a pulp and add some, sugar and juice and stuff, and then we can make applesauce. So this is how, everything goes. There's always a beginning point, and then, more and more things get learned. Karl Jung, 1875 to 1961, Jung explained the idea of the unconscious to a concept he termed the collective unconscious. This included what might be called primal memories, that is, inherited instinctual memories that have been common to all humanity from the beginning of our existence. And that's what some people might call instinct. He also developed the idea of inner self-experience as of equal value in the determination of individual personality makeup. That's what I'm talking about sometimes with you folks, when I'm talking about this person, doesn't know what happened in this person. Because your inner self-experience is yours alone. Other people, like I say, can look at you and think this, or they was standing outside of the situation and looking in and think this. But that's not your inner experience. That's not how you felt or reacted, or, that is a very individual to the person. And no one else can see that or know that except for you. Excuse me. Jung thought that Freud placed too much value on the psychosexual aspects of motivation, which most people do nowadays. The libido, the life force that Freud believed was sexual in nature, Jung considered to be an undifferentiated energy that could be turned outward or inward. So for him, it was, the mindset, the psyche. So it wasn't just all about sex. Individuals whose energy turned outward were called extroverts. He described them as outgoing, adventurous, and friendly, which was in contrast to introverts, who were reflective, shy, and cautious. Alfred Adler. Like Jung, Adler rejected the emphasis on sexual development and instead asserted that the desire for power was a stronger motivator. He believed that all people developed an inferiority complex, or a term he coined, during infancy, and then spent the remainder of their lives trying to overcome it. So, you're born, you can't do nothing, and everybody's bigger than you and stronger and can do everything. And that makes you feel bad inside, according to his theories, so that you have to become proficient and even excellent at everything so that you can be as good as these people. So, however, Adler's major difference was in his insistence that social factors must be included as determinants of personality, because they are. Everyone you meet in life, like I say, puts something into you. You like them, like something about them, and they teach you something, or you don't like them, and you don't like stuff about them, and they teach you how you don't want to be. In fact, he maintained that social elements were more important than the biologically inherited foundation on which they worked. So he saw that it wasn't just nature, there was nurture involved. And a lot of psychologists will tell you nowadays, even if something was put in you, you can get it out. And by that I mean stuff that's put into your head, we ain't gonna get into weird stuff. But, people are gonna affect you. And, if you can overcome that, that's going to help you immensely. Karen Horney, considered to be a neo-Freudian psychologist, Horney rejected the biological orientation of Freud. Instead, she expanded Adler's theme of socio-cultural influence. In her view, anxiety originated in poor interpersonal relationships, especially inadequate parenting. So, she felt like if you have poor personal relationships, that's a red flag. That's a sign that there's a problem somewhere. The result was a feeling of helplessness, of having to face a hostile world all alone. In order to cope with this anxiety, children develop one of three strategies for dealing with people. And I talk about, people, codependent families who are labelers. Everybody gets a label, and that's how they deal with the person from that point on. Doesn't matter who you are, how you are, how you change, you're this. Number 1, compliance. Being submissive and dependent, a conformist. Number 2, aggression. Being competitive and covertly hostile, a rebel. And number 3, withdrawal. Being reserved and distant, a loner. And most of us, to some extent, are a little bit of all of these in different situations. Because usually no one coping mechanism works in all situations. Once one of these patterns have proved successful, the child would generally rely on it for all situations. And this will continue into adulthood. But what is successful for children is not always appropriate adult behavior. And some people never learn this. Some people are still acting like toddlers when they're grown people. So that's unfortunate, but it's true. When the favored strategy stops being so successful, the person's whole coping response breaks down. And I've seen people like that. They're just really aggressive with other folks, and they wonder why there's problems in their interpersonal relationships. Like, I don't know. It's like one of my clients one time was talking about all these other people. They're all like this, and it's like, well, have you ever stopped and thought about maybe if everyone around you is like this, maybe there's a problem that you haven't looked at with you, and sometimes people don't like to hear the truth hurts, but that's kind of how that is, because no, not everyone around you is ever going to be a certain way, now certain people in your family or outside of your family or, whatever can be, but if everyone treats you a certain way, there might be something there that you need to examine, just saying. The result is abnormal behavior. So when you can't cope with a thing, you don't know how to deal with a thing, you're going to exhibit some abnormal behavior. And, that's just a fact. Erikson. Erikson is what has been called an ego psychologist. That is, he belongs to a group who viewed Freud's idea of the ego as being too limited, the ego being caught between a rock and, which is, the id, and a hard place, the superego, with no purpose of its own. Erikson feels that the ego has its own energy, drive, and purpose, separate from its mediating tasks, as evidenced in the human ability and desire to reason, to know, to learn, to solve problems. So, he's in there figuring stuff out. He's not just trying to keep these, two at bay. He's trying to, figure it out. Why is this not good? Why is this good? He's trying to learn and grow, as we all should. Listen to your ego. This group focuses on improving the adaptational responses of all people. And that's the goal. Your adaptational responses, the way you adapted to your life situation, has caused you to have these responses, these coping mechanisms, these abnormal behaviors. And the goal is to get you basically untrained of them. Because it's something you've internalized and you've used it to deal with the world. And that's not always good. So sometimes it's retraining your mind to the fact that, you don't have to be like this. Erikson's concept of the personality is also different. To Freud, the personality was set in childhood and did not alter significantly after that. And of course now we know that's not true. To Erikson, the personality never stops growing and changing, and that should be true. You should never stop growing and changing. I know I don't. Like I tease the kids and say you learn something new every day, because you do. So, if you stop growing and changing, that's not good. He has expanded Freud's psychosexual development stages from 5 to 8, moving on into adulthood. He also maintains that psychosocial maturity is at least as important as the psychosexual, and his stages stress this. Because, when you become a young adult and you start having sex, that's what it's all about. Hooking up, getting it, whatever. But then, another stage is to learn intimacy. Sharing yourself with another person. Now, some people don't know the difference between sex and intimacy. They think those words are the same word, but it's not. It's not the same word at all. You can Google that and see if you don't believe me, or if you're old school and still look up stuff in a dictionary, do that. For each level, he describes a psychosocial crisis that, if not successfully resolved, can lead to emotional breakdown. Those are not pretty. I've had a few, and I know other people who've had some bad ones where they went in-house. But, I think that it's good to stop before you get to that point. Go get some help. Go talk to somebody. If you were raised that's, not okay, that there's still a big stigma around mental health, get over it. Go talk to somebody, get some help. Because people who use those terms like, weird, crazy, whatever, they're ignorant, and that's all there is to it. It behooves you to go and get the help you need, take out your emotional and mental garbage, so you can be a better whole person and be the best version of yourself. 3 other important post-Freudians deserve mention. Anna Freud, the daughter of Sigmund, Karl Menninger, and Erik Fromm. All 3 of these psychologists are proponents of the basic psychodynamic model. Anna Freud elaborated on her father's discussion of the ego defense mechanisms and finalized them in her book, The Ego and the Mechanisms of Defense. That was written in 1937. You might be able to find a copy of it if you Google it. I don't know. Menninger, who founded the Menninger Clinic in Topeka, Kansas, compiled evidence from his own research at the clinic that supports Freud's original hypotheses. So you might call him one of the first clinical psychologists to kind of start putting this stuff in practice. Fromm called his own brand of therapy Humanistic Psychoanalysis, which placed him halfway into the camp of a group of psychologists who offered various internal psychological explanations for behavioral deviance that were not in full agreement with Freudian theory. We start out, with fixation, and, people do get fixated. People do get stuck in certain areas. And like I say, you can't always logic that out. It's best if you want to go talk to somebody and get this figured out. But certainly Freud was onto something. He was the first guy that started, thinking that, hey, this stuff can be internal. It doesn't have to be a, physical problem in the brain. This could be, this person has had this happen and then this has led them to this way of thinking and doing things. He definitely started people on the right track, with the talking cure. And then other people have built on his work to make it, more usable, to treat people. We are animals. We're not vegetables. We're not minerals. So we do have instincts. And so Jung was onto something there. There are archetypes, if you want to talk about that, and the anima and the animus and all that stuff. You can Google some more about Jung if you're interested in all that stuff. Adler was onto something where, you start out as this little tiny person who can't do anything for themselves. And that's frustrating, of course. You don't really remember that part because your brain is not wired well enough to start remembering stuff till you're usually about 2 or 3 years old. So, but there's a feeling there. There's a feeling, It's like, I'm this little person, and I can't do all this stuff these big people do, and that gets inside of you. So, the way you deal with people tells people a lot, That's what a friend of mine who is a licensed counselor said. Once you start studying psychology, it affects you because you start analyzing everybody. It's an occupational hazard, and you can start saying, well, they probably got this, they probably got that, this looks like this, but you can't, of course, ethically just start spouting out, well, you know what, the way you're acting, I think you got this, but you see what you see once you start seeing it. So the ego does do a little bit more than be a mediator. We all want to learn, grow, thrive. Hopefully, that's what you want to do. If not, again, you should probably talk to somebody about that. Freud kind of set a base here for folks to build upon and figure out a little bit more about what's going on inside our, emotional and mental lives. And that has led to modern psychology. That has been a big help to a lot of people. So that's where I'm going to leave you for today. I hope this helped you figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. Please like and share this educational program around the world. And it is an educational program. It's not designed to treat or, solve any mental problems for you. If you found yourself triggered or you think something I talked about is a problem in your life, then by all means go talk to your mental health professional. Thanks for watching. If you want to help me out, subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you want to help me out even more, go to my Patreon page and become a patron. The link to that is in my posts. Thanks for watching or listening. That's all for now. Until next time.